From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy day in the legislature, both in committee and on the floor. The House and Senate met for the 25th legislative day, meaning there are now 5 legislative days remaining, and the session could conclude as soon as next week. Let's start in committee, where lawmakers were looking to move bills into position to pass before the session ends. The Senate Education Budget Committee met today to consider the Education Trust Fund for fiscal year 2023. The committee made some changes to the House-passed version, including increasing the total appropriation by about $588 million to a total of $8.2 billion. Senator Arthur Orr, who chairs the committee, also included major improvements to salaries and benefits for teachers. In addition to the 4% across-the-board pay raise, the new budget would call for additional raises for teachers with 10 or more years of experience in the range of 11% to 21%. The salary increases are being called historic and are meant to help the state recruit and retain good teachers.
Our current system when it comes to salaries is you have a step raise every 3 years, as opposed to state employees where you get a 2.5% step or 2 steps or of 5% every year. Well, if I'm an educator and I've got to wait for every 3 years to hit, unless the legislature does something different with a overall raise, that doesn't breed a lot of confidence in staying in the job if you don't get a raise until every 3rd year. And then when you get one, it used to, if you went back several years, it could be as less than 1% for some years that you got raises. But then it seemed to me, if we've got the money, let's go ahead and give annual raises. And so this bill allows a 1% raise every year.
The education budget and related bills passed committee unanimously and will now go to the Senate floor. The general fund budget is 1 vote away from final passage. A conference committee met today to present a final version of the budget based on the different versions passed by the 2 chambers. That report was passed by the Senate and needs 1 final vote in the House to go to the governor's desk. The general fund totals $2.7 billion for fiscal year 2023. A record level of spending for the state. A bill restricting the use of medical marijuana by pregnant women is likely dead for this session after it failed to receive a vote in committee today. Senate Bill 278 from Senator Larry Stutz would require a medical marijuana seller to obtain a negative pregnancy test of any woman of childbearing age before allowing them to fill a medical marijuana prescription. It would also prohibit mothers who are breastfeeding from acquiring medical marijuana. The bill was scheduled to be considered by the Children and Youth Services Committee today, but a lack of a quorum prevented a vote.
From my background of practicing OBGYN and taking care of pregnant people, I see multiple problems with drug abuse during pregnancy. On a very frequent basis, I counsel people about stopping using marijuana during their pregnancy. Also counsel them about other drugs, about alcohol, about cigarettes. And as we looked at the bill, and it's now the law of legalizing marijuana as medical marijuana, I felt like it was important to have some parameters in place about not supporting pregnant people legally having medical marijuana.
The House Health Committee today held a public hearing on legislation that would require women, prior to an abortion, to call a state 800 number to find out what public resources would be available to them if they decided to give birth instead. House Bill 401 from Representative Charlotte Meadows creates a pregnancy launch program that would be overseen by the Department of Public Health. It would link women with medical assistance and postpartum support. Meadows said it is intended to make sure those faced with difficult choices know what help is available.
What the substitute does is really somewhat technical, but it actually changes the time frame from 9 months to 10 months in the bill, and then from 18 months to 20 months. for the certain things that have to be accomplished. There's deadlines, and so that extends the deadline by 1 month instead of 9 months to 10 months, and by 2 months at the end for the whole program to be put in place. The reason for that is really simply to get into the next fiscal year for the Department of Public Health to make sure that we have time to fully fund what their needs are.
No vote was taken on the bill. That could happen as soon as tomorrow. The Senate took up legislation that would abolish the state auditor as a constitutional office and transfer its duties to the Office of State Treasurer. Lawmakers have complained for years that the state auditor doesn't do much in the modern era and that it's a duplication of state responsibility. Senate Bill 30 from Senator Andrew Jones would put the decision to voters in the form of a constitutional amendment, and it wouldn't take effect for another 8 years. Senator Bobby Singleton was skeptical about the prudence of the idea.
Why are we just throwing out a constitutional office?
I wouldn't say we're throwing it out. We're consolidating government, streamlining
You're
government.
throwing it out. You won't have no office of auditor no more. You throwing it out.
Well, the duties will be under the umbrella of the state treasurer's office. As you well know, this office inventories state property. That's the main function. They're also an appointment to the board of registrars. But those are the main things, tracking state property.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Next, I'm joined by State Representative Paul Lee from Dothan. Mr. Lee, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You've got a big bill in committee tomorrow. You are the chairman of the Health Committee in the House, and the issue of telehealth is a really big one this session. This bill came from the Senate, passed yesterday. Tomorrow it's in your committee. Walk me through some of the tenets of this bill and what the pressure points are.
Right. Well, there has been some concern for some time because of no regulations, no platform, nothing whatsoever with telehealth. Broadband has expanded the use of telehealth, which is a great thing. We use it not only for telehealth, but in the education world. The pandemic has just expanded that opportunity. And so, when you have no rules or no platform, there's a lot of things that can be abused. Basically, it's a wild, wild west out there right now. Our concern is people will start making cold calls to a lot of our people in the state and saying, oh, do you have a problem? Do you have a back problem? We can help this. Tell me your insurance, and then let's start to do this on through telehealth. Well, that's one of the main reasons we want to do that. And then also, we'd like to make sure that telehealth keeps the same standard as a person face-to-face with a physician as best we can. So that's the end goal.
Mm-hmm. So, I could see that. I could see it, now that it's been normalized, right?
Right.
It's been normalized to have a doctor's visit over the phone or a FaceTime or whatever you do. And so I could see the potential for abuse. So, folks come in and kind of cold calling and, almost kind of telemarketing.
And that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. And then they're again trying to make sure the care is as much as we can make it the same level. Some questions, we've had, this is a rare bill. I've carried quite a few bills over the last 12 years, and a lot of those have been health bills. But this is a rare situation when we have the insurance companies, the hospitals, the physicians, nurse practitioners, the trial lawyers. All these people in the state of Alabama have come together. I've had to get them all in the same room to work out different issues. And it's taken some time and done a good job with it, and we're ready to get this thing passed. We have one particular group that's outside the state that's probably 95 to 98% where they need to be as far as approve or agreeing to what we're doing. But in my eyes, the people in the state of Alabama are the ones that we're working for most importantly.
Mm-hmm. I know I listened to the debate in the Senate, and there was some discussion around how many visits or how many appointments can you do via telehealth versus, okay, now you need to come to the doctor in person. Can you explain any of that?
Right. Well, that's some of the confusion. They're thinking that a lot of people are trying to say that there's a limit of how many times you can do this. No, there's no limit. However, once you hit 5 telehealth visits for the same issue, then you can go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, but within that 12-month period, you have to see a doctor face to face. We just think it's good medicine. If you're seeing the same doctor for the same problem 5+ times in a year, then you need to see one face to face and let that physician examine you in a real-time fashion.
Mm-hmm. In committee tomorrow, do you expect it to move? Do you expect this bill to become law?
Oh, I expect it to. Feel like it'll sail through the committee. I feel like it'll go through the House, and that'll be final passage. The committee is very familiar with it. They've had the final version of it in their hand now for about 5 or 6 days, as well as every member in the House. So there's no surprise.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears, the general fund is also moving. You're on the general fund committee in the House. It could be voted on as soon as tomorrow. Record revenues means record spending in the general fund. Are you pleased with the product that came out of the legislature here?
We have been very fortunate in the state of Alabama. And as well as you know, I guess 8 or 10 years ago, the general fund was just drying up. And so there was a lot of work that had to be done. I've made this comment. I sit next to the chairman of the general fund as well, Steve Klaus. And for about 2 or 3 years there, I thought that he knew no other word than no, because people would walk to our desk. I'd be sitting there and would ask, what about this? Can we get this kind of money? He said, no, we don't have it. And it took that type of leadership in the general fund to make those good conservative decisions to put us where we are. A lot of people don't realize, but prior to the pandemic, we were sitting in one of the best financial situations we've been in the state of Alabama, and still are today because of a lot of the federal dollars that came in. But it's not because of the federal dollars that came in after the pandemic. It's because of those good conservative decisions that were made 5, 6, and 7 years ago.
Well, you're right, and I do remember those days in terms of the general fund being dried up. And you did see a lot of other states have serious financial problems during the pandemic, or just because of that loss of revenue.
Right.
Really didn't see that here.
No, and that's simply because of the work, I believe, and that's in the general fund and the education fund. So it worked in both positions. But we've been very fortunate. We kept our businesses up and going. We haven't shut anything down, and that's the key to it, keeping people to work. I guess if there's anything that I would love to see in the state of Alabama that I think would help us all, would have more people in the workplace. I know our unemployment is low. I run a business, a couple of hundred employees, but I'd love to be able to have more people to choose from, and that generates money, helps the whole state.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about this catalytic converter issue. You had a bill dealing with catalytic converters. I believe it's through the legislature. Walk me through what this does.
Well, ironically, a lot of times people bring things to you, but this bill started the way you teach kids in school how a bill should start. This bill started because I had a gentleman in my church that runs an auto shop, and he was having people steal catalytic converters out of his parking lot or behind his fence. And so we started the process, I did, working with our legal group here, to build a bill. Once I got the bill in place and written, it's amazing how many people in Montgomery came to me and said, we want to help. And they were very supportive because over the years, people would steal things out of the homes, the electrical lines and the air conditioning, and then they had started hitting the catalytic converters. And unfortunately, when somebody does that, they make, I don't know the number, probably $500 or $600 off of it, but they do $3,000 worth of damage to the vehicle. And so that's what started it. Fortunately, we passed it in the House and Senate, and I think the governor's supposed to have a bill signing day for April 7th, from what I understand.
Okay, how about that? The Schoolhouse Rock model of passing legislation.
Well, that one is a great example.
Yeah, it comes from the ground up.
Yep.
Well, we're out of time. I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next on the program, State Representative Mary Moore from Birmingham. Representative Moore, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
I know that you are involved in many issues this legislative session, but in particular, you have introduced bills on Medicaid expansion and the grocery tax. I'll start with Medicaid expansion. This is a subject that's talked about every year,
Yes.
But in the Republican majority, they have been reluctant to really let this advance. Same thing with the governor, reluctant
Right.
to let it advance. What do you think it'll take to get them on board?
I really don't know, and I guess just off the top of my head, it's going to take them being in touch with their constituents, which I don't believe that they are. When you look as though we're still, even though we're on a downside with the pandemic, and you look at the information that comes out about the people who went into hospitals because of COVID infections, and the people who had to have the most critical care were people who did not have health insurance. And so somebody's got to pay that debt. The hospitals, somebody, and at some point in time, that debt, when all is said and done, is going to fall on the state. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's going to take their constituents, and especially with what has happened with COVID, and every family know what they have experienced now, and hopefully them not wanting to go through that again, they'll be a sounding board to the Republican Party that this is something that we need.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the point that they always bring up is revenue, and not having enough revenue to cover the long-term expenses of Medicaid expansion. But now there's talk, whispers maybe, that this gambling plan, if it ever were to pass, it's not going to pass this year, but if it ever were to, then that revenue could be geared toward Medicaid expansion. Do you think there's a path there?
There's a possibility, but we've been saying that for a long time with gaming bills. I don't think the Republican Party has bought into gaming, period. Lottery, whatever they talk about. I think they use it during election time to kind of motivate their constituents to go out to vote, thinking that they're going to get a lottery bill. But I don't think that they've truly bought into it. I also think that with the Medicaid expansion, when it first came out under President Obama, they put forth help to Alabama by some of the debt that we had. They forgave it. Then,
incentives and things.
And incentives, they did that. And then at the last minute, Alabama came, I think it was Governor Bentley that wanted to start a different program, and even with us telling him that the program that he had in mind had been tried in the VA hospital years ago and didn't work. And then they wait till the last minute and say, oh, our plan is not going to work. So I don't think they really bought into Medicaid expansion as far as how they can finance it, because if the will is there, I've seen too many bills come through. We passed bills this year that had undetermined amount of money coming out to general fund. So when we passed the general fund budget, my question was, how do we deal with those bills that had undetermined amount of money is coming out of the general fund? Can you show me where that undetermined landed? And they couldn't. So at the end of the day, I think when they get the will and desire to do Medicaid expansion, they'll find the funding.
On a similar note, the grocery tax repeal has been around for a long time. I remember Mr. Knight every year would introduce this. And this year, you saw some Republicans come along, Andrew Jones, Mike Combs in the House, to also have bills. So with something with such bipartisan support now, I'm a little surprised it hasn't advanced further.
I am too, because after I dropped my bill, for sales tax off of food. I went to the floor and addressed the body to say that if we've got several bills for sales tax off of food, why don't we get together? And I spoke directly to the speaker. You're the speaker. If we got several bills here, let's see if we could take the best of both bills, of all the bills that's out there, and let us come with something that we could pass. Never heard a word from anybody.
Well, and the issue there that I also hear is anytime you touch sales tax, you're messing with the education trust fund, right? And so any kind of revenue you take away from there, a lot of people are going to accuse you of taking money away from schools. So is the answer replacing the revenue, and then you got other issues in terms of raising taxes? So it just turns into a complicated issue.
I think it could be complicated because we want it to be complicated, but I think that we could just look at our overall budget, because I sit there, and I've been here a while, and I've seen things that they want to do that's not a one-time situation, but it will go for years. They've done it. But we have not taken the seriousness to sit down and look at our education trust fund. If we are saying that sales tax is going to hurt it, then how can we prevent that? Now, with the bill that I had, it rolled with a gasoline tax, 1 cent at a time, to give us that opportunity to look at how do we replace 1 cent. And then later on down the road, another 1 cent. In my way of thinking, it would be easier to looking at how we replace 1 cent over a period of time rather than taking the whole 4 cents off at once. So at least it's something we could have tried. And not having looked at the other people's bills, we could have looked at their bills and to see what was possible. But that opportunity has never presented itself.
Well, as you mentioned, you've been here a while. You've seen speakers come and go. You've seen colleagues come and go, and are a vocal presence there on the House floor. How would you rate this session? We've seen a lot. We've seen a lot in terms of revenue in these budgets. We've seen really interesting things happening on education. We've also seen a lot of hot button issues. What's your reaction on just kind of how the session has gone?
It's been a difficult session, but the brightest light from this session is the Education Trust Fund, because that's one of my passions, that in order for Alabama to be the state that it needs to be, we have got to put the money where our mouth is when we're talking about education. And we just thank God that we got a lot of federal dollars in this year that's helping us do some programs in reading, math, science, being able to go back and put those teachers' aides back in the classroom, looking at putting social workers and psychiatrists in the school. So that's the bright star that we got out of the session. But on the other hand, we had a lot of difficult bills that came forth that, in the Democrats' opinion, were not good for the state of Alabama. Critical race thinking, for people to take a thought process and turn it into a truth that's not the truth. Nobody has ever been taught critical race thinking in an elementary or K through 12 school in the first place. And from my knowledge of it, the only time it's introduced is in a law school. And it was something, and you really look at it, critical thinking, period, says that if an incident happened or an event happened, why did it happen? What was the impact? What can we do to make sure it don't happen again? But we don't do that to our children. The permitless carry bill, I think that with all the problems that we have with guns in this country, period, and the mass shootings that we have in this country, and the fact that most of our sheriff department use that pistol permit monies to help operate their departments. So how do you supplement those dollars that's going to be taken away? Plus what I've learned from the law enforcement, when a person didn't have a permit for a gun when they do a stop, they could have that opportunity to search the car, which has led to drug trade, has led to people carrying an unusual number of guns. So it had its benefits, and I wish they had given that more thought.
A mixed bag for sure. We're out of time, but I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Hey, I thank you.
All right. We'll be right back.
Birmingham's Rickwood Field is the nation's oldest operating ballpark and served as the home field of the Birmingham Barons, Birmingham A's, and the Birmingham Black Barons for decades. The Birmingham Barons inaugurated the new field on August 18, 1910, by defeating the Montgomery Climbers. The Black Barons played there between 1924 and 1950. Rickwood hosted Birmingham's minor league teams for several seasons through 1987. From 1967 to 1975, the Barons were owned by Ensley native Charlie O. Finley and were part of the Kansas City and later Oakland A's organization. More than 100 members of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame have played at the field, including Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige, and Willie Mays. Today, the historic field is managed by Friends of Rickwood and hosts local amateur and college teams. The Birmingham Barons still play a ceremonial throwback game at the ballpark every year, the Rickwood Classic, which celebrates Barons teams of the past and this historic field.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 10:30 with more coverage of the legislative session right here on APT. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.